Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay, make sure that this looks good. All right. Hi, welcome. This is the post-summit AMA. I always figured it'd be good to do one of these prior to going to Mongolia. So anyway, it was a very, very, very long week for us at IOHK. First, we had to get our entire company to one place, which in itself yields a lot of logistical challenges. And then there was a public event. The total attendance for the summit, which was pretty impressive for short notice, was around 750 people. We had a lot of great speakers come, from Stephen Wolfram to Rudy Rucker. Tyler is the representative in the state of Wyoming from Sundance, small district. He's also the guy who's running Beef Chain. Caitlin Long was there. We had government officials from several countries come, the country of Georgia, the country of Mongolia. We were going to get some people from Ethiopia, but there were some issues last minute with visas and other such things. But they were there with us in spirit. We did have some of our Ethiopian students attend, which was always nice. And overall, I think the summit was a great internal success. It was a lot of fun to see everybody. Everyone who attended, at least anecdotally, said that, hey, they had a heck of a lot of fun. It was nice meeting all the IOHK personnel. And it was really cool to see who we are as a company and what we do. The summit wasn't exclusively about Cardano. It was also about our company and how we write software, who we are, the types of products and projects we work on, what we're doing in the enterprise space, and how that relates to our cryptocurrency portfolio, how we do research, how we do consulting. There were a litany of little things back and forth that we covered. And we had only 2 days to do all of it and talk about all of it. And then also we had guest speakers like Bill Ottman from Minds, who has a very large social media platform that's decentralized, and a litany of other things like that. We also had Ariel Garten from Muse. If you use that meditation headset, she talked about the latest and greatest of brain-computer interfaces. Rudy Rucker talked about his sci-fi work, which is just out there, and it's a lot of fun. And another thing, and I wanted to start the AMA with this, I got a lot of gifts from random Ada fans, and probably the most meaningful for what we're doing is a letter from Einstein that someone gave me. They just walked up to me and said, hey, keep this anonymous. Don't mention my name, but do hang it in your office. So I got to find an available wall. I've been putting up some artwork, but I wanted to read the letter out. It comes from an essay that Einstein wrote in 1935, and it's entitled "The World as I See It," an essay by Einstein. So it begins with, how strange is the lot of us mortals. Each of us here is here for a brief sojourn. For what purpose he knows not, though he sometimes thinks he senses it. But without deeper reflection, one knows from daily life that one exists for other people. First of all, for those whose smiles and well-being, our own happiness is wholly dependent. And then for the many, unknown to us, to whose destinies we are bound by the ties of sympathy. 100 times every day, I remind myself that my inner and outer life are based on the labors of other men, living and dead, and that I must exert myself in order to give in the same measure as I have received and I am still receiving. I have never looked upon ease and happiness as ends in themselves. This critical basis I call the ideal of a pixie. The ideals that have lighted my way and time after time have given me new courage to face life cheerfully have been kindness, beauty, and truth. Without the sense of kinship with men love like mine, without the occupation with the objective world, the eternally unobtainable in this field of art and scientific endeavors, life would have seemed empty to me. The trite objects of human efforts, possessions, outward success, luxury, have always seemed to me contemptible. My passionate sense of social justice and social responsibility has always contrasted oddly with my pronounced lack of need for direct contact with other human beings and human communities. I am truly a lone traveler and have never belonged to my country, my home, my friends, or even my immediate family with my whole heart. In the face of all these ties, I have never lost a sense of distance and a need for solitude. My political ideal is democracy. Let every man be respected as an individual and no man idolized. It is an irony of fate that I myself have been the recipient of excessive admiration and reverence from my fellow beings, through no fault and no merit of my own. The cause of this may well be the desire, unobtainable for many, to understand the few ideas to which I have held my feeble powers obtained through ceaseless struggle. I am quite unaware that for any organization to reach its goals, one man must do the thinking and directing and generally bear the responsibility. But the led must not be coerced. They must not be to choose their leader. They must be able to choose their leader. In my opinion, an autocratic system of coercion soon degenerates. Force attracts men of low morality. The really valuable thing in the pageant of human life seems to me not the political state, but the creative sentient individual, the personality. It alone creates the noble and the sublime, while the herd, as such, remains dull in thought and dull in feeling. This topic brings me to the worst outcrop of herd life, the military system, which I abhor. This plague spot of civilization ought to be abolished with all possible speed. Heroism on command, senseless violence, and all the loathsome nonsense goes by the name of patriotism. How passionately I hate them. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the most fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Whoever does not know it and can no longer wonder, no longer marvel, is as good as dead, and in his eyes are dimmed. It was the experience of mystery, even if mixed with fear, that engendered religion, a knowledge of the existence of something that we cannot penetrate, our perceptions of the most profoundest reason and the most radiant beauty, which only in the most primitive forms are accessible to our minds. It is this knowledge and in this motion that constitute true religiosity. And in this sense, and only this sense, I am a deeply religious man. I'm satisfied with the mystery of life's eternity and with a knowledge, a sense of the marvelous structure of existence, as well as the humble attempt to understand even a tiny portion of the reason that manifests itself. So the letter is signed by Albert Einstein, and then this is a letter to John Hertz from Trinity College that's also signed. And that's just a really amazing gift. And I'd highly recommend you read his essays, again, from 1935. And it's still relevant today as it was way, way, way back in the day. It's amazing how history tends to rhyme. Okay, so this is going to be a long one. First, we're going to do kind of a post-mortem on things, and then address two particular collections of questions that the Reddits have been flooded with. The questions of Shelley's release, the questions of delays, and also the roadmap as it relates to these two things. First, it's important for people to understand that we live in a bubble in the cryptocurrency community. And while we think everybody knows everything, everybody knows each other, we think that while things that are immediately accessible to us are also accessible to the broad world, the reality is less than 1% of the world really cares or is in our space or has used our products. And I'm saying R is in the entire cryptocurrency industry, not Cardano, but Bitcoin, Ethereum, all of these types of things. So it's incredibly important to think carefully about how do we get to the millions and inevitably billions? What does the marketing message need to be? What does the adoption curve need to look like? And how do we make it accessible? If it's a game of user experience and user interface, we've already lost. And the reason being is that that game has already been won by Apple and Google and Microsoft. They control platforms with billions of people. They're masters of UX and UI, and they will be able to outrun us and outcompete us every day of the week, 7 days a week. And there's no way to catch them. You can try to dream your way out of it, but it's not going to happen. So it can't just be a game of user experience. It has to be a game of philosophy, and it has to be a game of principles, and it has to be a game of education, as much as it is a game of first to market and UX and UI and features and capability. So one of the things we tried to accomplish with the IOHK Summit was to try to show not just the technology, but also show the human side, the practical applications, the types of people who would be buying these products, the types of people who have an actual need for these products. To date, I think this is the first summit ever held of any company in the cryptocurrency space that had government officials as diverse as the mayor of Miami to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia attend. And all of these people are decision makers. They control budgets in the millions to billions, and ultimately they control the fate of hundreds of thousands to millions to hundreds of millions of people. And we tried to make some announcements, diverse announcements at the summit, to show that we're making progress along those verticals. So, for example, we signed an MOU with the government of Ethiopia, the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, to create a cryptocurrency for them. That will be used as a utility token for the city of Addis Ababa. It has potentially 6 million users. Should this be successful, we've brought 6 million people into our space with a real product that has real demand and need. Second, the government can make the use of the token compulsory for utility payments and for transportation payments, which means that it has real demand. It's not just a made-up thing and aspirational, and we hope will acquire customers. It's a government-sponsored monopoly in that respect, which also creates digital identities and digital credentials. Furthermore, this is a model that we can then take shopping to dozens of governments all throughout the world to repeat the process, which in turn will bring people into our ecosystem. Now, we need a bridge to get there. We need some framework that will allow us to be able to build and deploy these things in a very bespoke way according to the needs of that local government partner. Cardano cannot be everything to everyone, which is why you need a permission ledger technology, which can be interoperable with Cardano. And once credentials, assets, and identities are created within that system, they can flow into open systems. And that's exactly why we created Atala. Now, we had several presentations of what can Atala do. We have signed MOUs from everything from a major shoe manufacturer for anti-counterfeiting to what we mentioned with Ethiopia. It's extraordinary to me that some people have flooded our Reddit saying there are no meaningful announcements. To this date, I don't think there's any cryptocurrency company running around building coins that'll be used for 6 million people with a government-sponsored monopoly. To this date, I don't think anybody's built something of the complexity and scale of Fabric in less than 1 year of engineering and is already getting ready to deploy it for pilots with things behind it. So I'm just blown away by some of that commentary, but it comes. Another thing is we did some studying over the weekend, and we noticed that there was a lot of noise from accounts on Reddit, Twitter, and Telegram, which are new accounts, single post accounts. So I suspect that there was some post-conference coordination to spread FUD. But these things happen. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the roadmap and the release of staking, because that's something that people have brought up quite a bit. So when we first did the roadmap back in 2017, it was a very different type of project. We had very different types of actors, and we also had a very different type of management. So let's look at first the IOHK side and then the broader community as a whole. So on the IOHK side, we had really 3 collections of activities that IOHK was doing: research, formal methods, and code development. Now, amongst the code side, the code was segregated into 2 groups. We had a smaller, specialized group of people who were doing prototyping and real protocol design. And then we had an external entity called Sarakel that we brought in to basically release something to market and maintain what has been released into market and eventually transform that with the help of the smaller group of people into a production system. Now, in practice, what ended up happening is that we converged to a waterfall methodology, quite by accident. We didn't want to do it, but that's what happened. And so when you're in waterfall, what happens is you think you have a date to release something, and then as you get close to it, you regress not just back to a starting point, but all the way back up the chain, some cases. And the science people say, oh, well, we didn't account for that. We need to do something. And the formal methods people say, well, we need to respecify that. And the software people say, well, we'll wait for you to give us something new to build. Now, we realized very early on this wasn't working. Second, the code quality that came from the external contractor was just deplorable. It was riddled with bugs. It had a lot of poor designs, and certain things were overly abstracted and overly complicated, which made it very difficult for QA to work on that code. So what we had to do is take resources that were assigned to prototyping that could have accelerated and sped things up, and assign those resources back to the core product that was in market. And we started having to hire and get new actors into the ecosystem, which is exactly what we did. We brought in Twig as a partner. We brought in Vacuum Labs as a partner. We brought in ATIX and scaled up their participation as a partner. And then we realized that we needed to build a new Cardano wallet. Now, we had two options there. One was to try to iterate the existing platform that we had to a point that it was stable. And the other option was just to start with an entirely new code base because the existing one wasn't where it needed to be. And we weren't happy with it. It was too hard to work with that code that had been delivered to market. So we had the resources to do both. So one team went and started modifying Daedalus and modifying Cardano SL so that it would be functional. And we did a series of updates from Cardano 1.1 up to 1.4, where we chased that. And for the most part, Cardano now has converged in market to, on the Haskell side, a very stable wallet. There are very few bugs that remain with that system. And most people who complain either are using an older version of the software or don't actually know how to read. We have a help desk. We process tens of thousands of tickets. We've released FAQs. We've released active debugging. The software now is fine. It's stable. It works. It works for the exchanges and it works for the users. Now, the other effort was to create a parallel product team. And we did this with ATIX and our internal Rust team. And we wrote from the ground up in less than 4 months the infrastructure for Icarus, which bootstrapped the Yoroi project, which now is in market. It's gone through 4 or 5 major updates. They have support for other things such as multi-sig. And we have now CSV export and so forth. These are facts. They happened. You can just look through the GitHub repos. You can look through all of our external communications. Now, we recognized that we had issues with project management. We had issues with how we were doing product management. And to be frank, these things come up when you're dealing with a very complicated software. For example, we're not just dealing with cryptography. We're dealing with cryptography intersected with distributed systems theory, intersected with game theory, intersected with peer-to-peer networking, intersected with Byzantine actors, intersected with a desire for decentralization and decentralized control of the system. This is among the most complicated of all software to develop. And when we realized that our project management methodology had converged to something looking a lot like waterfall, we realized that we would not be able to achieve the deadlines that we had set. Furthermore, I don't make any money from delays. I actually lose money. I've already been paid to deliver Cardano. There's a scope of work, and I'm not going to leave until that's done. So every time there's a delay, it's a cost I bear. Every time we can't stake, I can't stake. And as we've publicly announced, and you can see the address, and nothing's moved from it, so the people who say we're just divesting our ADA and living high on the hog, it's a complete lie. It's a provably complete lie. We could make quite a bit of money from staking. So these delays hurt me much more so than average people in the community. I'm not really in love with them. I hate them. So what did we do? Well, we changed our entire project management system, and we changed our entire product management system. We went to demos. We went to weekly reports. We went to a litany of other tools and techniques that allowed us to actually systematically get more agile. We also moved from an external director of engineering to an internal director of engineering after we found a candidate who actually knew how to do the things we wanted to do. And that's Bruno Paleo, who's been now in the job for a few months, and he's completely reformed and refactored a lot of the systems and techniques that we've been using. Furthermore, we moved to a 2-client model. The Rust client does not have to follow the formal specifications. The Rust client has the option to go off spec and the option to go in a slightly different direction for the sake of getting releases out faster and for the sake of also getting a deeper understanding of the consequences of these protocols at scale. I will remind everybody that none of these protocols existed prior to us inventing them. We've taken nothing from anyone else. We wrote scientific papers, and in this case, more than 40 scientific papers. And after writing those papers, have gone from papers to code, and in some cases, months. This is seldom done by anyone. Yet we did this as a community and as a project. And not only are we doing it, we're at a point where the software is reasonably mature. We're at a point where we have a reasonable mastery of the protocols to an extent where we've actually now rewritten the Ouroboros Classic paper. We're almost done with the rewrite of the Ouroboros Prowse paper, and we're going to then rewrite the Ouroboros Genesis paper. And the Ouroboros papers have evolved, including Ouroboros Chronos, which decentralizes our timekeeping so we no longer have to be reliant on NDP or other such things. We also have the ability to turn Cardano into a cryptographic beacon with Ouroboros Thos. This is an output of great research, but every time it's done, it does tend to move the goalposts a little bit. And so to avoid a waterfall style cascade, we had to do new things. So these delays didn't come from incompetence. They didn't come from the fact that we didn't know what we were doing. They came from the fact that we were doing new things that no one's done before. Furthermore, they have been mitigated by the fact that we've added different teams with different philosophies, and we're running them in parallel and doing great things. Now, we have made considerable progress towards the final implementation of Shelley. Another piece of FUD that I see floating around the Reddits is that because we just released the final set of formal specifications, or at least the candidate set of them, that now we have to write all this new code, and only now have we begun the implementation of Shelley. Since September of last year, we have had more than 40 engineers working full-time, doing nothing but implementing the Shelley code base. Prior to that, we had about half as many people trying to get there, and they were regressed because of delays due to the prior issues that I've mentioned. And that work has come to a point where we do have reasonably mature nodes, reasonably mature wallet software. And right now, what we're doing is pulling things together, pulling the wallet back in together, verifying that all APIs that we think are going to work the way we think they're going to do, that the systems are stable, and we're very close to getting out the Shelley testnet. We had the entire Rust team together in Hong Kong for a month, away from their families, away from their wives, living in suboptimal conditions, basically exclusively coding to get to a point to have a Shelley testnet. We had a very strong organizational belief that we would have that work converge either at the end of March to around the summer. We're almost there. I got an internal demo to see the quality of the code and where we're at, the feature set we have. We're nearly there. It's not like we have months and months and months and months and months and months of more things to do, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. The questions have been answered. We've gone from aspirational to research to prototype to actually having a good blueprint for how to build things and put things together. And, at this point, people keep saying, give us a testnet date. And the answer is when it's done. I'm getting incredibly tired of people demanding something when they don't understand the context. What does a testnet mean? Does a testnet mean a full production system? We're just not confident if it's 100% ready and secure. Does a testnet mean a proof of concept? Had we had proof of concept testnets, we could have had proof of concept testnets last year. We wanted to get to a testnet that we could share with the stake pool task force, and we're nearly there. Furthermore, we wanted to see certain infrastructure mature. For example, like the Cardano stake pool nodes that Marcus has produced. So these things are nearly where they need to be. If you're upset about it, I will remind you that even amongst the largest and most powerful companies in the world, who have many years of track record of building crazily difficult things, delays do happen. For example, with Windows Vista, which used to be called Project Longhorn, it was started a few months before the release of XP in 2001. They anticipated a release date in 2004 to 2005. It was released in 2007. They had over 5,000 engineers and decades of experience, billions of customers, and they still released 3 years late. Furthermore, it was released without the ecosystem's full support, which led to a device driver nightmare, challenges with UAC, and other such things. And they had to basically rush a new product, Windows 7, as a way of repairing the damage done by the Vista launch. I will also remind you that Boeing, one of the greatest engineering companies in the world, was 2 years late with the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. And even still today, they have production problems, software issues, And some of the innovations they brought with the 787 actually apparently have flaws, which has resulted in the crash of planes. And I'll also remind you that they pre-sold many of those planes, and customers had to wait years to receive delivery, despite the fact that they'd forked billions of dollars over to the Boeing company. Now, we're ahead of Boeing and Microsoft, and they have a much longer track record, and they deploy much more serious software at the moment than we do. So if you don't want to be patient, then don't be patient. But do not call us dishonest. Do not say that we're liars. Don't say that we don't know what we're doing. Furthermore, IOHK has never sold any of its ADA. You never bought any ADA from me. We are not a publicly traded company. IOHK did not do an ICO. We're a service provider. We build software. It is not my responsibility to make you money, and it is not my responsibility to see the appreciation of price of ADA. If we've done our job and we've built a great ecosystem, millions to billions of people will come into this protocol. And as an investor in Cardano myself, I'd really like to see that reality happen. I do not make money from delays, and it is fundamentally insulting and patronizing to say that our company is doing nothing, especially when we've been blatantly transparent about where we're at. Our GitHub repositories are open. Our Git issues are open. We release reports all the time. Every month, Emergo produces a roll-up of things that have been done. It's very clear for anybody who has the basic ability to use Google and type in IOHK GitHub to see an overwhelming amount of software that's been delivered to market and continues to be delivered to market. And, frankly, if we delivered substandard things, the news would be IOHK is incompetent. They don't know how to build a cryptocurrency. And look, after all of this waiting, we got nothing. So you can't win either way, guys. If you want the price to go up, what do you think it would do to the price to release something that's not quite ready and has flaws and bugs and allow our competitors to dogpile on us and burn us to the ground? Would you rather wait another month or two to get something so that it actually can demonstrate the value and power and capabilities of the things that we're bringing to market? Or would you rather want it now in a bear market where the price probably is not going to move very much? Think about this honestly. So the testnet will come out. It's not a year out. It's not 6 months out. It's coming. When? Not going to tell you, because it's done when it's done. And what we're going to do is we're going to move to a system where we're going to start doing demos, and we're going to start trying to move a lot of the weekly reports that I get into the public domain. So this is a product management priority. Furthermore, there was an expectation of a Cardano 2020 roadmap. We wanted to be very careful that we avoided the old roadmap, which had percentages and timers. We had the percentages and timers because we wanted to force accountability to the Cardano Foundation. This was during an era under the Michael Parsons leadership, which was fear, paranoia, and frankly, no desire to contribute anything to the Cardano ecosystem. We felt by creating social and public accountability that every month something had to be broadcasted and progress had to be moved forward. This would force the foundation to release things and make good on commitments that they had made to the Cardano ecosystem. It worked a bit, but not completely. And furthermore, it was under the old project management system, which was, after careful review, a waterfall system. So we're moving to a different roadmap design. And we're moving to one that clearly articulates what are we trying to accomplish and how are we going to get there. And then we connect that with weekly reports, a monthly wrap-up from product management. So that'll be David Esser, alongside demos, which will first be done internally and then redone for public consumption, and then combined with the use of testnets. Now, these two artifacts together, I think will give you guys a much clearer and cleaner idea of where we at with the project. Some things are ahead of other things. The Goguen release, for example, is nearly done. The Plutus guys are waiting for integration. We can't integrate until Shelley's out. Other things are still in heavy debate, like the Treasury system, for example. We've written several papers, and we're building a prototype team right now, and we think we can get that out in the first half of 2020. There's a very strong possibility, but that has to be put through a process where you can see how these things mature and materialize. Again, this is new stuff. The good news is that we can do things in stages. The problem with consensus, and this is something that Ethereum is running into with Casper, and this is something Algorand is running into, many other people are running into, is it's the heart of your entire system. So there's no notion of iterative deployment or iterative rollout where you can do like a half consensus protocol or something. Because at the end of the day, it's either secure or it's not. It's either decentralized or it's not. And so, yes, you can absolutely release a system with a cradle mechanism that basically is training wheels, but then that's not decentralization, and it's not a complete and fair test of if the protocol actually works or not. So in some cases, you do have to wait. Now, in 2018, we had Ouroboros Praus, and we felt that that was at a stage where we probably could bring that into production. But then we decided to move the goalposts and say that Bootstrap from Genesis really was something that we'd like to achieve. What did that mean? It meant that we had to take a step back, finish a paper, make sure that what we were thinking is true, and then come back to the product and update and upgrade from there. And we've seen a lot of that happen for the sake of where we wanted to be for sidechains and the sake of where we wanted to be with consensus. We had to take step backs, move the goalposts a little bit, and spend more time in prototyping. Normally, you guys don't get to see products until they're close to finished. Samsung, for example, released the S10, and it has an ultrasonic fingerprint reader. Guys, they didn't just invent that between the S9 and the S10. It wasn't like they finished the S9 and they said, let's do an ultrasonic fingerprint reader. This is going to be great. 3D scans of a fingerprint. There were years of research and development that went into that product that had been going on for a while, and there were a lot of products that they had targeted. They, for example, wanted to launch it with the Note, not with the S10. They missed that deadline. But consumers didn't see that. It wasn't something publicly discussed. It was behind closed doors within their company. It's quite the opposite for us, guys. This is an open source research and development alongside production product. So you are seeing real-time R&D being done. You are seeing real-time our products being built, hypothesis made and validated or falsified. And as a consequence, certain things that we think are true 6 months ago turn out later on to be suboptimal or not a direction that we want to go in. That happens all the time in industrial research and industrial product development. I mean, if there was a cryptocurrency connected to the HoloLens, Microsoft would be the most criticized company in the world. So you have to manage your own expectations and realize that this is a long-term project. And this is something that's going to take years to decades to see it through to a point where we get adoption in the millions to billions. I have no intention of just walking away and saying, well, that was fun. Let's go do something else. I'm not Dan Larimer. You know, this is my life's work. It's been my company's life's work. We have people who wake up every single day who have put their brands, their professional reputations, as well as years of their productive lives into seeing this product grow. Wadler is not exactly a young guy. And how many more major projects and endeavors do you think he has before he retires? Do you think this is how he wants to spend the twilight of his career on a also ran, on a has-been? We have accumulated in this project the best and the brightest in the world for what we seek to do. We've accumulated within this project an enormous amount of organizational knowledge and wisdom and a lot of things on how not to build cryptocurrencies. That takes time, it takes effort. Ordinarily, it's done in private, and only after there's fruits to it does it be brought to the consumer. In the cryptocurrency space, we do it the other way. From day one, it's open. So you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. This does not mean that we're dishonest. This does not mean that we're not committed or we're not really trying. We have a lot of people who have given away weekends, time with family, had marriage problems, and other such things as a consequence of the commitment that they've put in to these projects. All of us have seen things like divorces, health issues, death in the family, and missing the funerals because we really want to get this out. We're as passionate about Cardano and ADA as everyone else in the world. And you know, the people who came to the IOHK Summit who were actually there and actually had a chance to interact with our employees, from the journalists to the people from the community, they saw that in the faces of everyone. The definition of success here isn't a science project. The definition of success here is a financial operating system for billions of people. And we're just going to keep doing that. So with respect to the roadmap, David Esser and other people are right now writing a revision of it, and we're writing the philosophy behind it, and we're combining it with new organizational processes. This has taken an enormous amount of time because, frankly, we want to manage expectations, and we want to release something that's not just aspirational, but also shows clearly how we're going to handle execution along those lines, and something that you can follow along with from the demos, the weekly reports, the monthly updates, and inevitably the test nets associated with these items. Furthermore, we have many partners now. We can't keep a secret at IWHK, even if we wanted to. Vacuum Labs, Twig, Well-Typed, ATIX, Predictable Network Solutions, and others are with us at IWHK, working hard every day. And all of their work is open source. You can see it. So take a step back, relax. Things will get better. And, we've made enormous progress. You can see the enormous progress from ledger support to paper wallets to new explorers being built in record time to formal specifications that people can read and port. And frankly, our company has delivered products to market outside of Cardano, and we've delivered them in record time as well, like Icarus, like Mantis, and now Atala. So we've demonstrated a track record of what we can do and how we can do it. And, nothing is going to solve this bear market. Nothing is going to solve the price issues. This is Bitcoin's game, guys. And until Bitcoin goes back up, until we see another surge, we're all going to be in the bleachers. The only thing that's going to change that for us is if we can decouple ourselves from the incumbent cryptocurrency community and go to the mainstream, which means that we have to attend non-cryptocurrency conferences. We have to solve problems for people outside of our industry. We have to build relationships with governments and large industries and bring real users in and create real demand. Or else we're connected at the hip with Bitcoin, and when a surge happens, it happens with us, rising tides. And when it goes down, we go down. That's not a reality that we ought to live on, and we shouldn't stake our fortunes on that pursuit. So that's the preamble, and I think that we have to, as an ecosystem, just have a bit more empathy and patience with each other. We're all in this together, and not everybody's out there to screw you or scam you and steal your money. And frankly, if I was out there to scam you, think logically about what we would have done as a company. And you can look at 2017 as the blueprint. You cannot scam people by saying you're going to go and do research and write papers and formal methods and bring outside parties who really don't like your space and are only there for the science. Because if you're lying, if you're dishonest, they won't stay. They'll leave when they discover the conspiracy. And somehow this has just been forgotten somewhere along the way. There are some people who don't feel this and are with us 100%, and they get it. And I appreciate that and I respect that. But honestly, for those who aren't, you really have to make some deep decisions about where you put your money, where you put your support. You're probably going to become the victim of charlatans. If someone says to you today, right now, they have a system that can solve all the world's financial problems, and how all these pieces are put together, they're lying to you. No one does. I know Manu Smorny. I met him years ago, almost 5-6 years ago now. And when I met him, I said, Manu, what are you working on? He said, it would be really great to create a standard for decentralized identity and web payments. And he worked with the W3C. Only recently have they gotten to a point where a standard has materialized out of the W3C. It's called the DID standard. That was 5 years of hard work, building foundations, building alliances, getting people on board with it for one little thing. Not how the identity system is going to work, just a standard for how we're going to reach the identity and how we self-authenticate a document that presupposes a web of trust and an existing identity system. One component, a life's work, 5 years of brutal politics and other such things. Now combine that with every other part of the system. And this is the only company in the space that seems to have this global view and seems to actually understand how some of these pieces are being put together. And, if I've had any part in expectation management, I'd say that I haven't done a phenomenal job of coming to you every single day and saying, look, guys, these are best estimates. This is original research. There can be delays. These things do take time, but our heart's in the right place. We have the right people. We have the right processes now. And boy, it takes a long time to get them. You have to earn them. And you can see the progress. It hasn't been easy. We've had to rebuild an entire foundation that was supposed to be here with us every day, and it wasn't with us for a long time. We had to learn how to build this type of stuff. We had to learn how to do good research and do research in a good time period. And we had to learn how to do good communication, all while other people were getting rich, all while other people were doing things. We've made, I think, great progress. So I'm proud of my people. I'm proud of everybody. And if you don't like what we're doing, look, there are over 1,000 projects in the space. Go find another one. It's okay. Different boats for different floats, different philosophies. So thank you for listening to that. Now let's get to the AMA. The fact that you are now giving an AMA proves that there's been slight panic in your organization. No panic at all. Actually, most of my people don't care because we made our peace and we said our things. But I do care because the attacks have not just been on me and our engineers, but they've been on our community managers, they've been on volunteers, they've been on community members, and really terrible, nasty things have been said. And, you really have to take a step back and say, look, people have to be civil. You can disagree without produce nothing, you provide nothing, and you're not going to help us get to where we need to go. I can't go to a government and say, we're going to go build your currency or a mission critical system or prevent waste, fraud, and abuse for millions of people, but then at the same time have an incredibly toxic swarm of people connecting to the products. And the minute that no value is extracted year one, that they just go and dogpile and attack people and ministers and presidents and other people and say, leave. So we really need to take a step back as a community, just chill out. Is Atala a separate project that will not utilize ADA? Atala is an enterprise ledger. And I've said since the beginning of the project, I also mentioned in Y Cardano that there needs to be a spectrum of solutions from the completely open permissionless ledger that has dynamic quorums all the way to the closed system that's permissioned and tightly controlled. There's a spectrum there. And right now we tend to look at them as different things. So you see, I'm either on Ethereum or Fabric. But reality is that we're moving to a world where these systems achieve the same core thing. They're talking about flow of information. They're talking about assets. They're talking about digital identities that are controlled ultimately by cryptographic credentials. If you build infrastructure to use an enterprise ledger, you have also built infrastructure to use a cryptocurrency wallet. So if I do a project for a government, for a supply chain, or a local currency, or a grid scale thing, I do something like that, then suddenly I've now given every participant in that project credentials that now will be interoperable with a cryptocurrency. You've brought in millions of potential customers. It's like saying selling the iPhone. You have created millions of potential customers for the App Store, allowing app developers now to build something for that community. So I see the permission ledger space as the entry point for a lot of people, and they just won't care in the beginning. When you do supply chain with farmers, they don't really care in the beginning. It's just all about selling their goods and better marketplaces for a higher price. But then suddenly they have wallets and digital identities, and then somebody can go to them and say, guys, would you like a loan? Have you heard of Cardano? There's a system now where there's a dApp running on it that allows you to get a stable token or something along those lines. And they say, wow, that's great. How do I use it? And they say, you have the infrastructure already, use it. You have the wallet for it. You have the payment system for it. You have all these things. You can store it on that. And it's just a software update. Or in many cases, you don't even need to do anything. So that's why we felt it was really necessary to create a product like Atala. It provides a lot of revenue to IOHK. It lets us do different types of things so that we're not just a one-trick pony, and we're going to be around. And frankly, we're going to keep doing research. And if it's really good, of course, we'll put it into protocols we've built. So it gives my company a longer future and allows us not to be so invested in just one thing, which is important. Second, it brings customers in for you guys, not just me. The iPhone App Store is kind of an open system, as is Google Play. And it's allowed people to build companies from Instagram to Uber to others in that ecosystem. And so we can't get to our Instagrams and our Ubers and our Airbnbs until we have a situation where we have a large, diverse customer base. And that's what Atala is going to bring us. All right, let's see here. Charles, new roadmap release date. Okay, one more time on this question. And yes, the eye is fully recovered. That was really, really tough. I couldn't see out of my left eye for over a week. It was really horrible. You never really know how bad eye infections get until you get one. And then you're like, wow, this is the worst thing in the world. Um, Again, with the roadmap, we have a collection of people within IOHK who are now working on the Cardano 2020 roadmap. We made a huge amount of progress coming into the summit. Then we had two summits. We had an internal one and an external one. We roadmapped and demonstrated it in the internal summit. And then we realized there was a little bit more that we needed to add. And there was a few more things we needed to do because there was a high risk that had we released what we had, that we wouldn't properly manage expectations. So we felt that it would be a good idea to just wait a little bit, then go ahead and say, oh, well, here's what we have. It's pretty and looks nice, and we have a lot of great ideas that are in there. And it's easy for us to explain where we're at with the demos, the test nets, the weekly releases, and monthly updates, and they can fit right into the roadmap structure. The other thing is we just brought on board a new director of comms, and he's only been on board for a little bit of time, and so we wanted to give him a little bit of chance to have some feedback and input into the new roadmap. We felt it'd be fundamentally unfair to commit ourselves to a particular philosophy when there's a new director in who's responsible for that. So I know it's a little unfortunate, but my speech kind of outlined when I was at the summit roughly how we think about these things. We have clear milestones, and two that we're working on this year are Shelley and Gauguin, and we know how to get those out. And the two that next are priority for next year are Basho and Voltaire. Exactly how far along that road we get is completely contingent on whether the code rewrites are completely successful, and that what we think is true about the architecture we've chosen and how our processes are working is true. We have a lot of evidence that it is, but 2017, 2018 happened. And so we're a bit more cautious as an organization. And we also realize that people misinterpret and amplify things in ways that are irresponsible, usually for financial gain, either to damage our price or add up to our price. Are you leaving IOHK when your contract ends? No, I own IOHK. It's my company. There is no reason to leave it. It would be crazy. I built this company as the company I'd like to run for the rest of my life, or unless we find somebody better to do it. So I'm not going anywhere. Where is Pink Floyd? I put the poster in the basement. I just got my artwork in. It took months to get painted. That's a Pollice Verso right behind there. It's a painting from Jean-Léon Gérôme. It's a big painting. It's very heavy. Charles got an eye infection from wearing a monocle. Actually, I got it from shaking hands. That's the downside of being accessible. You shake thousands and thousands and thousands of hands, and then you touch your eye. And I remember that when I did a presentation in New York at D-Lab, there was one person there who had these red puffy eyes, and in hindsight, it looked like pink eye. And I shook his hand, and I touched my eye, and I didn't realize that, I'm getting myself infected. What can you do? Are we going to have a stable coin? We need a stable coin. We really do. And there's a lot of different ways to build it. And I have like 6 people in my company that have come to me and said, this is what we ought to do. And I've had a lot of other people in the ecosystem come to me. We've had a lot of regulatory discussions. For example, we had lawmakers from Wyoming come in. We also talked to Caitlin Long. And the environment in Wyoming is such that it may be possible to actually set up an audited stablecoin within that jurisdiction for use outside of the United States, or in some cases, perhaps even in the United States, because the SEC is now issuing a no action letter that could be dollar backed. But it may be better to build a bunch of utility and municipal currencies and then put them together into like an SDR or a basket, and then use that as a Pan-African currency, which would be intrinsically a cryptocurrency, and then could be used as a stable coin. But it's a product that we would really like to do and build. And it's something we have to do because you're not going to have lending in native ADA. ADA is too volatile. It's why we don't do gold-backed lending. All right, keep them coming, guys. Let's see. Can we invest in IOHK instead of Cardano? Well, if we've done our job right, Cardano is a financial operating system, and that also includes the STO standard. I've been working with the Polymath guys, and we've had a lot of discussions about how do you build security tokens and what type of infrastructure is required for that. So I would like to believe that Cardano would be a very appealing platform long term to host decentralized security tokens and bake within that security token enough contingencies that they can be traded only within certain domains. Once we've constructed all of that infrastructure in that framework, which will come naturally as a organic revolution space, it would be quite easy for us to tokenize IOHK itself as a company. So I think that it would be a lot of fun, assuming we could find the regulatory view and assuming that IOHK continues to be an attractive company and we have long-term, more sustainable revenue lines, especially with the enterprise side, to IPO IOHK. And we would definitely try to do that as a security token instead of a conventional equity. Will IOHK have a staking pool? Yes, we'll have 80 staking pools. And so this is one of the reasons why we gave Marcus some money and we're working closely with him. Those staking pools that you saw me announce at the summit, they will be made available for public purchase. We're just going to run them through a few more iterations. And so as we get closer to mainnet, they'll start percolating through and you can test them on the upcoming testnet. And IOHK is going to buy 80 of them and put them throughout all of its offices in different parts of the world. So we get a nice geographically distributed network, but it's something that we definitely want to do and it's something that we will do. Let's see what else we got here. What are your thoughts on the development of Ethereum Classic? So we are right now writing a proposal for the Ethereum Classic community. The financial backers who have been providing a lot of the resources for the existing clients of about a major collection of overhauls that we can do for Ethereum Classic that would be something that's achievable in the next 1 to 2 year time horizon. Should that get funded, we will continue support for Mantis and scale it up to the next level. We have a lot of partners that we can leverage to rapidly scale that team up that are complementary, meaning that they don't take any resources from other parts of our company. And we'll hire a dedicated product and project manager specifically for that effort. Should that not get funded, then what we're going to do is retire Mantis support at IOHK and just leave Mantis for the community. And we will no longer actively develop. So it's gotten to the point where it's the Ethereum Classics community's decision whether they want us around or not. We have some great ideas we think we're going to share, and if they want to fund them, we'll do them. And it's actually a great trial run for what we intend on doing for Cardano post-2020. We will have a treasury before the end of 2020. IOHK will not discontinue working on Cardano until the treasury system is fully deployed, because what we want to do is take another 5-year roadmap, say here's the next 5 years, and propose that to the Cardano community. And we'd love for the Cardano community to have a voice and an opinion on that, and for them ultimately to decide whether they liked what we've done and where we want to go. Now, my hope is that we have tough competition, and we have lots of people come in and say, no, Charles doesn't know what he's doing, and we can do it better, or we can do it cheaper, or we can do it faster. And if that's the case, then ultimately that's a victory for every single person who's in the Cardano ecosystem, because instead of just one voice and one group of people entrusted to just get it done, you now have basically the ability to decide what you want. It's almost as if people come to you with a bunch of different homes and said, you can have any one of them you want for free. Which one do you want? You only pick one. Or maybe you can get two smaller ones or something like that, and you get to make that decision. So we, of course, will make our best case for ourselves, and we hope that people go along with us. So the proposal we do for Theorem Classic, we hope that community accepts that, and we hope we can learn a lot from that process, and it'll give us a really natural path for how we're going to communicate what we can do for another 5 years post 2020. And then it's up to you. Is Cardano trending more of a sidechain host model? The answer is yes. Cardano has always been a two-layer system. So this concept of a settlement system and a control layer idea. So the control layers are either permissioned or permissionless, and they can have arbitrary complexity. And then the settlement system has basically everything that you would need for a long-term cryptocurrency. So basically, Cardano at the settlement layer is kind of like what I would like Bitcoin to look like. Had I built Bitcoin, if I was Satoshi years and years ago, and I had unlimited resources and money and all the engineers that I have, and we could have really worked hard, basically what Bitcoin would have been in 2019 would have been Cardano. We probably would have put a proof of work algorithm in just to create a distribution and then switch it over to Ouroboros, because you couldn't actually do an ICO back then. But basically, that's where we'd like to be. And we're nearly done with that in terms of the conceptual design and actually the formal specification. We have a total understanding of what ledgers need to look like, the accounting systems behind them. We have an incredibly intricate understanding of what consensus looks like and the trade-offs of consensus. We have a detailed understanding of interoperability. We understand how to extend the UTXO model to include pretty much as much scripting as you want, but do this in a very safe way where you have predictable gas cost. We have a really good understanding of what a treasury would look like if you put in, so you can sustain the ledger and have a source of capital available for the system to grow and upgrade. We know how to write APIs now that are actually useful, and we know basically how to get these things to work well on an exchange. We've had orders of magnitude improvement in things like size on disk, and also we've had a lot of improvement on memory utilization as well as speed of the system. And we have a really good idea of how this will scale to enterprise clients. So actually what we're writing for your desktop computer is the exact same software that will inevitably run on an exchange, which has thousands to millions of users and lots of concurrent transactions. To get the software to scale to that level and work well every time, not just once, but all the time, is tremendously challenging. But we figured out how to do all those types of things. Furthermore, we're moving to a subscription model. So you have to have PubSub and you have to have sidechains. And when you have these two things together, then basically what it means is you don't possess the whole blockchain. You don't possess the whole state of the system. In fact, we have research on the proof of work side that we've done, which allow you to do chainless mining. So you actually do sublinear mining. It's really amazing stuff. And there are analogies in the proof of stake system that are inevitably going to roll in. What does it mean? It means that you just focus on the things you care about within the system, because the system is going to be huge. It's going to be petabytes and exabytes of data and a massive state within the system. The UTXO will be in the gigabytes to terabytes, if not larger. So a lot of stuff going on. You're not going to be able to store that on your phone or your home computer. So this research we've done says you subscribe to the threads that you're interested in, the users you want to do business with, the things you want to do, the transactions you care about, your clique in the UTXO, and everything else you don't care too much about. But you use the system as if you could see the entire system. You get a cryptographic guarantee of that. There are products and projects like Algorand with Vault, Coda Protocol, and others who are chasing that. But frankly, we're ahead of them. And we've been ahead of them for a long time. We actually know really well how to do these types of things. The PubSub side of things, we've looked at protocols like Poldercast, and we have a route to do it on what the team has done on the Haskell side. And we have a really good idea of basically how sidechains applies to this, because the reality is a sidechain tells you a lot about a foreign chain, but that foreign chain can be your own chain. You know, Bitcoin is a sidechain to itself, because all you're doing is saying, this transaction I'm getting, does it exist and has it been double spent, yes or no? So that information is very useful. Those proofs are very useful, and they can give you the best in class like clients in a subscription model. Now, the other thing that hasn't been discussed, and this is something that really needs to be carefully brought out in the cryptocurrency space, is the notion of contingent settlement as well as metadata embedding. It's a controversial topic, but it's a topic that is being forced upon us. For example, the state of Texas is right now debating whether to pass a law that would require someone who receives Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency to know the identity of the person that they've received it from. So actually, it means all of you could make every Bitcoin holder in Texas a criminal just by basically sending them a small transaction because they don't know your identity, right? So it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how cryptocurrencies work. But the writing is on the wall that these systems have to be a bit more intricate and complicated. So there's two components to this. One is the idea of permissioned sending. So I have an address and Bob has an address. And right now, the way things are, I can just push a transaction to Bob with or without his consent. Doesn't matter. But what if Bob has a specially constructed address that says, you have to go and get my permission before the transaction will settle? So for example, let's say you're an exchange and Bob is withdrawing from an exchange. Well, an exchange would really love to have an audit log that showed they gave you your money. So you pull your 100 Bitcoin out that you've made from trading, and normally they just push a transaction to you and that would be it. But what if the exchange forces you to use a contingent address that then could be connected to an identity? For example, the DID standard, which is basically a URN that connects to a identity document. It's called a DID document. So they could say, look, before you're able to withdraw your money, you basically have to sign the hash of an agreement that this is a withdrawal from our exchange and that you've been totally settled for this particular transaction. Then that hash can be embedded along with the DID or an encrypted DID, so you can encrypt it with an audit key, into the transaction itself. And the transaction won't settle until that's been satisfied. So the exchange gets an auditable, non-reputable guarantee that they can show to the regulator, they can show to their third-party staff that you have consented to the withdrawal and it was you. Now, the advantage is it's an added layer of security from an exchange because you now have separate credentials. The login credentials to get access to the exchange, as well as the KYC credentials, which are connected to your identity, and these are separate. So they can basically have additional security, and if your account gets hacked, the person wouldn't be able to withdraw from the account. So there's a consumer benefit to this, but that very same infrastructure could be used for compliance for basically people in Texas. You could populate a Texas favored wallet that has contingent addresses, and basically it says, hey, no one can send me any money until I have their DID or something like that. And now everybody's in compliance and there's no way to make them out of compliance. So there's all kinds of primitive structures that you can build, and using Marlowe, you can put very sophisticated financial contracts on top of these things for all kinds of financial products, whatever they may be. And this is portable. Furthermore, the notion of metadata embedding, basically what you're doing is saying you have some commercial understanding of the transaction between Alice and Bob, and you're taking that entire understanding and you're transmitting it through a pub sub interface. So you send out of band to Bob that metadata, and then they sign it, the hash. So the transaction has the hashes. They're not reversible, so they're secure. Nobody can know what you did. But you possess a copy, Bob possesses a copy. So if the tax man comes, the regulator comes, other people come, you can show a time-stamped, non-reputable, auditable, immutable record that you did, that's what that transaction was about. And nobody can be the wiser about it. Furthermore, with DIDs, you can encrypt the DID and embed it within the transaction as well. So again, you have a time-stamped, auditable, immutable, non-reputable way of verifying that that transaction is connected to that identity, but the encryption keys are up to the parties of the transaction to be shared with whomever they care. So either you can just possess it for your own internal records, you can have an audit key for a regulator, the taxman, whoever you care about, or it could be part of a larger commercial understanding between different parties. These capabilities are coming to Cardano. They're actually not hard to integrate, and because we designed things the way we did, by the way, that was another reason we had slight delays, because we discovered these types of patterns as we were building the system, and we said, boy, it'd be really cool to build these types of things and put these types of things into Cardano. And it would make Cardano kind of a system that could absorb a lot of the innovation that's been brought out in the permission ledger space or in policy groups. Furthermore, contingent settlement also allows for receiver pays transaction fees. So you see certain systems say that transactions are free. Well, you can now absorb that with receiver pays. Basically say, hey, the receiver has to contribute some of the transaction fee, and if they don't, the transaction doesn't execute, in which case you have a free transaction at the sender side. So we can absorb the credit card use case into the system as well. Yes, I agree. The Texas law is a little stupid. You'll see me gone on record talking about bit license. I've mentioned it many, 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 many times. I just don't like regulation like this. I think it's just really stupid. Regulation should follow the identity and the asset. We've moved beyond regulation being global for everybody, and we've moved into individual transaction from a vending machine and a $500 million transaction. It's really crazy. And so instead, we should move to a world where the transaction itself has metadata, identity connected to it, and a smart contract capability within it. And then it inherits its regulatory standard from the geographies it touches, the identities it touches, and ultimately the amount. And then you can have an auditable, time-stamped, immutable, non-reproducible proof that you've complied with the regulation. And then what you do is you click one button in your wallet software, it bundles everything together at the end of the year, and that's what you give the government and the tax man. And you're done. Your cost of paying taxes and filing taxes, your cost of compliance is automated. And then the burden is on the government to write the smart contracts and the regulatory standards. I'm really tired of these unfunded mandates where they say you must, you shall, you will, you do, and then they leave it to the industry to figure it out, not realizing that they're costing all of us millions to billions of dollars, which in turn get pushed to you, the consumer. All right, what else do we have here? This is a great question. If Cardano is open source and any other company can take and use your development, how will that affect our ADA value our ADA token value? I don't want to lose money or my ADA tokens. I get this a lot where I say, hey, if it's open source, can't people just fork the code and take all your innovations? They can fork the code at any time. They can't fork you. The reality is what creates value for cryptocurrencies are the users. It's the community. It's why I care so much about the community. It's why we have community management. It's why we have a lot of people running around. And so as a consequence, basically, if I was to fork Bitcoin today and create Bitcoin Charles Edition, it wouldn't be worth very much, and very few people would probably move over. We'd have few, maybe it'd be like SV or something, but it would be a pale imitation of Bitcoin. Same code, same innovation, same design, but you just can't fork that social dynamic, that social infrastructure. This is why it's so incredibly important that you have a treasury system and voting systems. Because right now, here's how the cryptocurrency space works, and this is why things get so toxic. You have a very small group of people who are developers, investors, big people who are actually building stuff in the space, the entrepreneurial class, the developer class, the infrastructure class. Then you have the speculators, which are everybody else, and they hold the currency. They're fans of it, may be philosophically aligned with it, but they don't have a voice. They can't do anything. They're just sitting there just hoping for things to materialize, and then a subset of them maybe move into the other class when they have smart contracts or whatever, but the vast majority of them are there. Yet they have opinions about where things should go, what things should do. And so the key is to give them tools to organize, tools to vote, tools to discuss the philosophy and direction that have teeth. Not just, here's my opinion, but also when my opinion is made manifest and gets a democratic consent behind it, then that opinion will turn into money that then can be used by the other class. And all of a sudden, everybody in this AMA has power and actually has a voice and an opinion. And you're not just talking about when is this coming out or when is that coming out. You're actually talking about where do we want to go and how are we going to get there and the things we need to do to get there and who's the best leader to get there. You can't fork that. You can fork the code and have another treasury system, but it's like saying, well, that big meetup group over there, I'm going to host my own meetup group, and I'm going to copy everything. I'm going to have the same banners and the same catering and the same everything. And you know what? Well, it doesn't mean other people are going to show up. They're going to stay in the other part. So then that way it allows you to have your cake and your eat it too, where basically you can be open source, you can be open, you can do all these things, yet at the same time, you don't have to worry too much about poaching and the stealing of technology. The other thing is that it gives people the freedom to compete with you in ways that make you better. Anything any of our competitors make, we can take. It's fair game. And if they hire a brilliant person, I get happy because I know that brilliant person is going to write papers and is going to write code. And I read that code just as much as you do with. Another thing, and this is a side note that I was asked at the conference. A lot of people said, you need to stop talking about EOS and Dan Larimer. And you also need to stop being as aggressive with people on Twitter. Guys, I once had it described when I was at university that I got 2 doses of brain and half a dose of common sense. And I was always a bit abrasive with my personality, especially through digital media. There's been a bunch of times where I've sent emails and tweets and other things where I've regretted it later on and said, maybe I could have been nicer or, done things a little bit better. I'm learning as much as you guys are. I'm only 31, and I started the cryptocurrency space quite young. I was in my mid-20s. And so I will do a better job at trying to be a bit nicer on Twitter and stop fighting with the trolls as much. And I also will try very hard to not mention EOS as much as I do. I just really am profoundly disgusted by certain things in that ecosystem, especially with the amount of money that they raised and some of the claims that they've made and things that they've said about us, amongst other people, and just the attitude that the community has that somehow they've earned the right to build all these things and do all these things, and as if they've already accomplished all decentralizing the whole world, when all they've really done is just wired 21 servers together, put a voting system on it, and I think almost all of them run on Amazon. So when you see that, and you see that outside people don't know the difference, and they're being scooped into this, they're putting their money into this, they're building products and projects on it, then it's entirely possible we could end up living in a world that could go in that direction. First off, EOS won't survive that world because it'll all just be run by governments, not some ledger run by a bunch of people. Second, people won't know the difference between real, true decentralization and what's being offered in that community. So I have a philosophical disgust as well. It would be almost like I would take Hyperledger Fabric and deploy it and say, oh, look, this is a great cryptocurrency, and I'll control the 21 nodes, and you just have a voting system. You let me know if you want to switch them or not. Oh, and by the way, a large portion of the currency, probably more than 51%, is controlled by me and my friends. So we always get to decide who's in control. I mean, it's like, honestly, guys, Fabric has better performance than EOS does. They also have a better architecture. Read the Fabric 1.0 paper. It's a technological marvel. So I'll mention them less. And actually, yes, Satoshi did get mad at Dan. There's a thread at Bitcoin Talk where you can see it, and I think it's even in his Wikipedia page with a reference to it. Charles, do you honestly believe deep down that there will be staking and smart contracts before the end of 2020? Absolutely, 100%. Deep down, believe it. And I lose money the longer that this goes on. So I don't like losing money. Like real money, because I have to have the developers on staff. We have to build these things, and the more labor costs that I spend from these things, it translates to millions of dollars every month. It's not exactly something that I enjoy doing, guys. I have to sign those checks. So yes, I 100% believe it's going to be done, and it's going to be done much sooner than the end of 2020. What's the big painting on the floor? That's from Jean-Leon Jerome. It's a painting about a gladiator, and he's trying to make a decision of whether to kill the guy he's just defeated or not. And the emperor is this going to do the thumbs down or the thumbs up. It was a famous painting from the 19th century. It's a big painting. I had to make sure it would fit on my office wall. Is the connection between the Cardano computation layer and the Cardano settlement layer contingent on sidechains? Yes and no. There's two ways to do it. We can launch a sidechain that's connected to Cardano, or we can have a firewalled protocol where if you adhere to a protocol and send a transaction, the transaction can be understood by the system, but there's no consensus connection. So you either have a master-slave model or a firewalled model. These are your two options. So the master-slave model means that when the stake pool is making the block, instead of signing just one block, they sign n blocks, and each block is for a different sidechain. So ADA will control basically who gets to do all that signing, but then those other chains inherit the consensus. So it's almost like a merge mining or kind of a proof of authority style deal. The firewall system just says that if you follow this particular protocol, we can inject a piece of information into Cardano. That means that we can now understand these transactions. So you could then send, let's say Bitcoin follows it, a Bitcoin style transaction that follows it, and then you can create a Cardano version of Bitcoin within Cardano itself. And that has all the same properties as Bitcoin. Then when you're done with it, you destroy that token, which gives you a cryptographic receipt, which allows you to unlock your Bitcoin back on the Bitcoin network, assuming that they support the NIPA protocol that we came up with. So these are your two options, one where you can tightly couple them, and then you've extended Cardano to have additional services that run it where they're completely free. Can you sue Tone Vase to call ADA a scam? You know, guys, if Tone got sued for every time he called something a scam, Tone would be in court for the next 600 years. You know, there's a world of difference between having critics and evangelists and people who just religiously believe that certain things are a certain way, and people who are malicious and cause a lot of harm. For example, if you look at the difference between Tone Vase and Jimmy Sung and Craig Wright, there's a big difference between these people. So Tone and Jimmy and others in that group, they just very firmly believe that Bitcoin is the way it is, and everything else is substandard. You know, that's like saying I'm a Denver Broncos fan and I think all other football teams are useless and only the Broncos are a real football team. Okay, there's fanboyism, there's evangelism, there's maximalism there. But at the end of the day, I don't think Tone would wake up and construct an elaborate scam to steal lots of money from you guys, or that Tone would actively be seeking to harm or diminish people. And if he was in a position of power, I don't think he'd actually throw the people in jail that he says he wants to throw in jail. He is who he is. And, also he has to get an audience. And when you say extreme things, you tend to get a greater response out of people in the way social media works than if you say neutral things or passive things, even though that extreme things aren't completely true. On the Craig Wright side of the world, you have a person who has asserted that he is Satoshi Nakamoto. The community has rebutted that with a demand for a certain level of proof, technical knowledge, moving of early funds, demonstration of things that only Satoshi could know, including private conversations Satoshi had with people, signing of digital messages with the PGP key or keys associated with the early blocks. I mean, guys, it probably took a few years to build Bitcoin, which means that there's an overwhelming amount of prototyping that you could see, scaffolding you could see as it built its way up to Bitcoin in context there that only the creator of Bitcoin would know. And really, there has been no demonstration of any of that to the community as a whole. Yet, not only is Craig convinced he's this guy, he's now starting to sue people. And that's just, I had one lawyer tell me that anything associated with Craig Wright is like getting molten tar on your body. It's like, even if you're right, you still have molten tar on your body. Good luck with that. It's just not a pleasant experience, and it's something that causes great harm. So we as a community, we need to be better at separating the fanboyism, the maximalism, the my team is better than your team, from the people who cover you in molten tar. And I think that if we are ever to get to the next level where we bring in grandma and we bring in everyday people, we have to change a bit, and we have to be a bit more humble and patient and careful. The other thing is that at some point, Satoshi's identity will be compromised. Lenstra and his gang, they broke a 768-bit PGP key. That was in 2010. Satoshi's key is a 1024 key. And frankly, a lot of the tech is there. The NFS, the factoring sieve that they used scales to that. So within the next few years, we should see a paper at Eurocrypto or Crypto breaking a 1024 key, which means if somebody wants to invest 6 months to 2 years of computational power on specialized devices using NFS, they probably could break the Satoshi key, in which case the identity is dead, because there's no certain way you could prove you're Satoshi Nakamoto. You could have circumstantial evidence and other such things, but the fundamental thing, the possession of a key that a guy like Satoshi probably would have never shared with anybody, more likely than not erased after leaving the ecosystem, will now be compromised, in which case everybody's Satoshi. And I think that's a good thing. I really hope that happens. We need to stop building cults of personality and religious deities around people who have done stuff. Shakespeare had a great saying, which is all the world's a stage and its people are characters. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many roles. But the important part of the saying is exits. And so as a consequence, it's really important to understand that even if someone has done something great, they're not going to be around forever, and you have to plan for that. People die, people retire, move. And we as an ecosystem need to move beyond that. Will other ERC20 projects that are currently on Ethereum's blockchain be able to switch to Cardano's blockchain, and how hard will this be to do? Actually, it's kind of ironic that this was a totally missed conversation at the IOHK Summit. We demonstrated the update for Plutus Playground, and actually that included multi-currency support, both for fungible and non-fungible tokens. So for the 771 standard and the 20 standard, there is a way to move over to that. So we're going to probably work more likely than not with Vacuum Labs over taking the tooling that's been constructed by the Plutus team, because we have a bit of time to get everything out for Shelley to move Goguen in, and include an ERC20 and 771 translator. So basically, there's a way that you can take your design of ERC20 and very quickly port that to run on Cardano. We have a different way of doing it because accounting is different. The easiest way of doing it would actually be a one-to-one matching, where we do support Ethereum style accounts within the Cardano ledger. We formalized that for the end of epic payments that we built for incentives. And we have a way of actually moving between account style accounting and UTXO style accounting. But our preferred way of doing smart contracts is the extended UTXO model, because it's functional. You get much better cryptographic properties, and also it's much easier to shard. And in a distributed system, you just don't want state to change too much. You really want to understand how that transitive flow is going to work. So we'll build some tooling to make it easy to port them over. And we have a lot of people who've come to us and saying, we'd like to port over from Beef Chain to Trexia and others. And we said, great. And we'll work very closely with that cohort to make sure it gets done. And then all of that infrastructure that's constructed to do that will be made open source. It's important to understand this, and this is why I pointed this out way back in the day when people were bragging about how many ERC20 tokens live on Ethereum, that's a temporary home. Nobody says, hey, my app is running on Amazon and therefore I'm locked forever to Amazon. It's infrastructure. And at the end of the day, the infrastructure's got to be doing it for you. And if it's too expensive and you don't have the feature set that you want, and you don't have the extensibility that you want, and it's hard to get your infrastructure to work with the other things that are in your product roadmap, then you're in the market for new infrastructure. So while Ethereum is a home for all these ERC20 tokens, it's not necessarily a permanent home. And at some point, a lot of people are going to move over to different systems. They've already done that. Some have moved to Stellar, some have moved to EOS. It's a very competitive space. There's going to be a whole new wave of tokens that come. That's the security token market, and they need a lot more heavy lifting. Polymath, for example, is thinking very carefully about these things, and they've written thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of Solidity code to try to build a framework to build these types of assets and embed within them the regulatory side. And it does require other infrastructure like DID embedding or some identity system embedding it with a compliance layer on top, a root of trust on that, as well as metadata embedding. Let's see what we got here. And if you wanted to migrate an existing ERC20, it's not necessarily hard because you have an ownership state. That's called a PKI, and you can port that over. And it's a decision whether you want to have 2 tokens, 1 token. You want to have it optional to the user where you burn the token to create a token on the other system. That bridge can be built. Or if you want to retire the token and then roll out the new token on the system. All of those things can be done. Charles, what do you think of Nick Szabo? I've met him. I've talked to him. Nick is a really good guy, and he's a really smart guy. He's another one of those guys got 2 doses of brains and a half dose of personality, like me. So he can be a bit cagey, as I can be sometimes. But that should never diminish from the great work he did throughout the 90s. And he's a very deep thinker. And what he kind of gets is he gets the concept of not falling in love with your own ideas. It's so easy to do that. The smarter you are, the easier it is to do that. And you kind of go down a train and then you get stuck on it. And you say, I am the best. But if you're really, really smart and wise, you recognize that your idea is operating under Starship Troopers rules. You have the job until you find somebody better or you die. And that's how you should always view these things. Is Ethereum superior for gaming over Cardano? Oh, heavens no. Actually, Cardano is going to be much better for games because we're going to have a cryptographic beacon in our system that the consensus protocol itself provides and a timestamping service within the system. Plus, there's a lot of layer 2 protocols that we can put in thanks to the stake pool design. If you have 1,000 of these stake pools, you have a natural set for bootstrapping MPC protocols as well as Lightning. That's a really nice system. You do not get that with what Ethereum's laid out. So I think in our time, we're going to get most of those people. Charles, who do you respect most in the crypto space? I've met a lot of people in the crypto space. There's different kinds of respect. So there's like technological respect, who's a really good programmer and really great mind. Greg Maxwell and Peter Willey are 2 great minds, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for their ability to write great code and their ability to just think clearly about things and express themselves clearly. I have a huge amount of respect for some of the entrepreneurs in the space who've been just beaten up and pushed around, like, for example, Charlie Shrem, a very good friend of mine. And, Charlie's gone to prison. We all think about this in the back of our mind. Wow, we're dealing with all these exotic new products that are in gray area regulation. Every now and then, maybe we go too far with something we do and inadvertently trip up on a law that we didn't even know about, or in some cases knew about, but didn't care as much as we should have cared about it. And Charlie dealt with the consequences of that, but he kept his head high and he didn't collapse in on himself, and wrote a lot of essays, came right back into the space, and he's trying to be productive and do things. You don't have to have huge impact or do great things to be great. And he certainly had a great impact on the early days of Bitcoin. And, at any moment, he could end up starting a company that could be just as big as Coinbase. And I think one of these days he'll get there. He was also the youngest guy in the space, too. The old joke was, that guy's 23. He's not 23 anymore, but he was when he was in his prime. I do like anybody who's created cryptocurrency and kept their principles strong, like Charlie Lee and, others. We have a lot of banter from time to time. But, if you do something, you do it for 5-6 years and you just keep doing it, no matter how much criticism, you get a dogged respect from it. That's an admirable thing. And it's cool to see that. Roger Ver's a very controversial guy as well. I know Roger pretty well, and we run into each other on the conference circuit. And he's another example guy that never really changed. The space changed, he didn't. And this is why he gets a lot of criticism, because he's kept the same ethics and the same opinion and abrasive style that was super, super useful in the early days of Bitcoin, because at the early days of Bitcoin, we had no friends. Everybody was criticizing us ubiquitously. The media was brutalizing us. No economist took us seriously. No technologist took us seriously. They're like, magic internet money, it'll be dead in a year. And Roger was just running around convincing barbers and restaurants and other people to accept Bitcoin, and he never gave up. But that same dogged evangelistic inflexibility, which was useful in the early days, at times has become a bit problematic for him today. Whereas Eric Voorhees did become a bit more pragmatic. He was the maximalist back in the day. Now he runs Shapeshift. I think that's the greatest come to Jesus transformation you can have. So it is fun to see these people grow. We're all kind of still young. It reminds me of what, if there's a great presentation, it was from Walt Mossberg at All Things D, where he interviewed Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. And it's one of the only joint interviews that it's around. It was back in 2007. And they were sitting together, and one of the most poignant statements was, we were once the youngest guys in the room, and now we're kind of the oldest guys in the room. So we're still kind of the youngest guys in the room for a lot of the industries that we're in, but we are getting older, and gray hair is coming in. And, you start getting reminded of your mortality, especially as you get through your 30s and 40s. And so at some point, the space will be different. But at the moment, we're all still pretty tight, and we all still know each other, and there's criticism from time to time. The other thing about our company is we get to work and interact with our heroes. For example, we invited Stephen Wolfram to come to the summit, not just because I like Stephen Wolfram and I think Wolfram language is super awesome, and Mathematica is an amazing product. I mean, for example, in his demo that he did at the summit, he just said, "Hey, let's just pick the top 20 shipwrecks in Florida, and I don't know, let's make a 3D map of where they were at, and where and let's embed that with like a circle, and boom, you could actually map of Florida with the coastline and little dots. It's just all real time, just from a few queries. That used to take weeks of data science to hunt down this type of stuff and make it presentable and so forth. But one of the cool things is nobody knows that he's actually Lord of the Oracles in the cryptocurrency space. To make smart contracts useful, you need Oracle data. Well, where do you get that from? Wolfram Alpha. So you're saying, well, based on who won the election, or based on, if the ship reaches harbor or not, or if the hurricane hits North Carolina or not, the contract's going to execute. You're probably going to query their servers for that information. So actually he has a lot of unintended power in our industry. So it's pretty important to know that guy and do things with him if we can. That's why we invited him. We also invited Rudy Rucker, completely outside of our space. He's talking about like plastic brain slugs you put on your neck called UVs that give you telepathy. Guy's out there. He's a brilliant guy. He has a PhD in logic. He's written all these great technical books on infinity and hypergeometry. But at the same time, he was an original cypherpunk from the same era as Hal Finney and Adam Back and all these other guys. And so just bring him to the conference to let him see the fruits of the labors of what they wrote about and thought about in the 1980s. It's real humbling. So that's the other part about my job that's pretty cool. And also just the hanging out with rock stars part is also nice. When we called up Steve Miller and said, "Hey, can you come play at our summit?" And he said, "Well, who else is playing?" And I said, "Well, I tell you what, CCR is never open for you. So if I get them, will you come?" He said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, with or without Fogarty?" I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Okay." So he came, and I had one request. I said, "Well, for all of our EOS fans, can you play Take the Money and Run?" And he said, "Of course I can." So he did. That was great. We had a great time with him and got to hang out with him for a bit backstage. And those are the fun parts of the job. Reddit and Twitter are the less fun parts. Charles, where's my ADA debit card? Actually, the foundation is negotiating that. We do have the Tangent card. We do have the Pay card in Korea. And then there's going to be some form of a debit card. Now, there is a question of infrastructure where if we were to get listed on an exchange, a certain exchange that had its own debit card, maybe we would get that for free. But there is a negotiation ongoing with the Cardano Foundation about that. It was promised by the foundation, but never delivered by the foundation. And now that it's under to clear their financials, the books were an unmitigated disaster. They fired the old auditor, brought a new one in. They have to kind of go back through everything. They finished 2017, and they're almost done with the 2018 books. It was pretty grim, and nothing was done. So everything had to rebuild. By the way, if you're really interested in Marlowe, there are two classes that we launched, one on both on Udemy. They're free, and one's on Plutus and one's on Marlowe. We have about 2,000 plus subscribers for them, and we just released it. So do check those out. Marlowe is really easy to use, and it's designed to be easily to use. That Blockly interface called Meadow, you just drag and drop things together, and you can build a puzzle piece, and boom, you have a contract, and it auto generates the code, and that'll run in Plutus Playground. Yeah, actually, I agree the foundation should definitely do AMAs. I know they're going to hire an executive director for the foundation, and they've been in talks with a litany of candidates. They've also been in talks with new board members. They are going to do 50 to 80 ADA ambassadors, and then they're going to pick a subset of those ADA ambassadors to be a steering committee for the foundation as well. So they're getting a steering committee, they're extending the size of the board, and they're going to hire an executive director. And the executive director should do on a monthly basis AMAs. And I will publicly push for that. And you guys should be able to ask a lot of questions, because at the end of the day, it is your foundation too. And you should definitely have a say in what they do, what they say, where they spend their money, and so forth. Charles, thoughts on Justin Sun's tactics to promote Tron? My prior AMA, I mentioned it, and you should just reference that AMA. Charles, staking pools is a 1,200 the absolute limit in theory, or could the Cardano staking pools be limitless? Actually, yes. It is not the limit. It's a parameter we can change where the optimal amount of money is made from a collection of stake pools. That can be 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And as we get closer to Hydra, we have an incentive to try to have more of them, because it massively improves the performance of the system. This is the advantage of really thinking about things carefully, because when you know what's coming, you can make accommodations for that in the design of the system, and then you just change a parameter, and then boom, you have it. You don't have to throw away all the code and redesign everything. That's super painful, and as we've all experienced, creates delays. There is no limit to the amount of staking pools that can be registered in the system. Right now, there is a kind of a peak of the amount of money that can be made. It's almost like a reverse parabola, where you have kind of a top of that. And then if you have more, the collective amount of money each stake pool makes is a little less. So we'll start with 1,000, and then our hope is when Hydra comes out to change the incentive model so that it can be limitless, and there are incentives for more. Because the more you have, the faster the system will run. Within reason, there's going to be some cohesion breakdown when you have too many shards. We actually are right now working with some external experts like professors from UIUC to try to work on the network stack a little bit too, to accommodate a massive amount of these pools. I'd also like to have a geographic distribution of the pool. So I think it'd be really cool if we can layer some trusted hardware in for geostamping, so that you have an incentive not just to run a stake pool, but you have an incentive to run a stake pool in a different jurisdiction. I do not like the centralization of these things, because the minute that the government policy changes, then you have to throw away all those devices and move to a different jurisdiction. It's less of an issue for us than it is for proof of work, but it's still an issue. And it would be nice that we have a lot of geographic resilience. We'd also get much stronger quality of service. Did you ever watch the Banking on Bitcoin documentary? I was actually in it. They interviewed me for 45 minutes, but they cut my interview. So yes. All right, let's see here. I want to clip it at 2 hours, so 20 more minutes. Let's look for some good ones. Comfort like a land rush? No, and actually this is one of the reasons why we're rolling out the testnet first and the way we're doing things. Basically, it's up to you if you want to run a stake pool to make the case to run a pool. So there's two cases. You have a monopoly, or you're making an appeal to the community. The monopoly is you actually own the ADA itself. Like, for example, we have a lot of ADA. I'd like to stake it. if you do the numbers, it translates to about 80 pools under the amount that we have. So obviously we're going to stake to our own pools so we can have feeless staking. But that's not the case for everybody. And there's a lot of people who want to set up charity pools or pools representing certain community interests. And basically the way that we design stake pool registration, you can put that in the metadata of the registration. So you can use social campaigns like Reddit, Twitter, and other things to point people towards you and to accumulate lots of delegation. So it's a survival of the fittest, and it's going to be basically who has the best case for the community for the ADA that is not being massively held, like the IOHK Emergo and CF ADA reserves, for example. The other thing is that we've set up a two-tier model where you have delegation addresses, you have enterprise addresses and then regular addresses. Enterprise addresses are excluded from staking. And so they're built for exchanges and they're part of the exchange software. But the point of these addresses is basically to make sure that when you send your ADA to an exchange, you can cosmetically see if the exchange has the ability to stake or not. So this basically creates some transparency. Certain exchanges are starting to start stake pool services because people are moving in this direction and they can stake on your behalf. But it would be nice to know if the exchange says, hey, we don't stake with it, that you can get a guarantee from the address that you sent it to know that that address can't stake. And then when you get money, that you got money from an address that couldn't stake, not a hot live address. Creates a bit of transparency in the system, and you transitively can follow these things. It keeps exchanges honest. And I think that's the first time a cryptocurrency's done that. There may be one that has, but I'm not familiar with one. Charles, are you watching Game of Thrones? No. What I'm probably going to do is wait for the entire season to finish and just stay out of it. And then I'll download all of them and watch them on one of my long plane rides. I did that actually for all of season 6 of Game of Thrones when I was flying to Japan. It was a 12-hour flight, so I had ample time to get through the entire season. Episode 9 was pretty amazing. And the death of Hodor was pretty terrible. Will I be able to create my own token with ADA? Yes, we are a multi-currency ledger. Charles, what sort of staking returns can we expect? I'd say between 3 to 5% is probably what it's going to be set, but it hasn't been quite set yet. There's a lot of factors we have to look at and prioritizations we have to look at. And frankly, it's a discussion based upon cost of operation. It's one of the reasons why we need to get this damn staking testnet out. And I'm so frustrated about it. I want it out as soon as possible because I'd like to get the 1,200 people who are in the stake pool channel who really, really, really want to stake to get there. And then they can start sharing data with us and it can help us finalize some of these parameters. Now, I wouldn't say that Coinbase is ignoring Ouroboros. We have been in contact with Coinbase. We've talked to Balaji. I'm Facebook friends with them. We've talked to a lot of people at Coinbase. They're a great company, and they do great work. It's just they're one of the market leaders, and they move at their own pace, and they do their own things. And there's a world of difference between what they publicly say and the things they explore privately. I think they even have their own venture fund, and they put money into like Starkware and these types of things. So like all great companies, it's an iceberg, and you guys see the tip, and we see on the inside a little bit more of the iceberg, and only the people inside the company see the whole structure. So the key to dealing with these types of entities is simply patience and doing a good job and building things the right way. And somewhere along the way, you eventually get rewarded for that, as long as you keep to your principles. No matter how much progress you make, if you're built on quicksand and you don't have good principles, nobody's going to want to associate with you. But if you're built solid, everybody wants you. Okay. Come on, guys, give me a good question to end on. Will Clio 1 ship Rock Pi with the pool already installed, like a plug and play kit? Yeah, that's the intent. We're not only just looking at the Rock Pi, we're looking at the ecosystem of technology around the Rock Pi, including trusted hardware management for the KES. We have a protocol called Triple M that we've augmented ED25519 to have. So these things have to run together, and we're trying to put a whole kit together that you can just download and install on an existing device. But then also you could buy a pre-assembled and pre-configured device, and maybe we'll work with Crypto Supreme or other vendors to provide an initial set of that, and then basically have references through. We also have connections to Arduino and people on the Raspberry Pi side. So it'd be really, really cool to see if we could do something through them. The advantages of the Haskell code base and the Rust code base that they're being rewritten is they're actually built for both 32 and 64-bit binaries. So it should be a lot easier for us to get them to work on low-power devices, and hopefully we can hit that Raspberry Pi standard. But we'll see. We're trying that out. So we will commercialize these bowls as a proof of concept. People can buy them, use them, and they're really small and they're passively cooled. They run on less than 10 watts of power. I mean, it's like, guys, when I was holding it in my hand, literally this box is bigger than the SIG pool. I mean, it's really crazy to see how powerful these things have gotten, and they're very modular. So you can plug in trusted hardware, you can plug in larger storage, you can do all kinds of things. The only thing we couldn't do with those Rock Pi boards is it didn't have expandable RAM, which was inside the ARM ecosystem, like the new Snapdragons that are coming out, the desktop class, the 85X or something like that, and move in that particular direction. But anyway, since you're a big fan of the company, when we do have one available, I'll see if we can make a custom one and ship it to you and put your logo on it. So just look for that. But I can't promise we'll have that this month or even next month. We're working at the speed of Marcus and his guys, as well as the speed of Crypto Supreme, and also availability supply chains. The cases that we had were custom fabricated and hand painted. So if we are to commercialize those devices, they'd have to be made through different processes. We have looked at 3D printing as one process for the case design, but it's a side project. And so it does take a little bit of time. We will test Lightning on them as well, just to see how well that runs. Good question, though. 5G. Hey, these Snapdragon chipsets, they come with 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5, and they come with a litany of other in-the-can stuff, including ARM Trust Zone. So that is just really the perfect infrastructure, and it's really low cost. Even the most powerful of those processors are like $40, $50. They're not super expensive. And if you go one generation back, you can get them for like $5 or something like that. And then you put it in with embedded memory and other things. And if you're in the 4 to 8 gigabyte range, the price point is usually about $80 for a full system that includes everything. So if you're willing to spend a little bit more, the $300 to $500 price range, you can get a really powerful device, like 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM, usually about 128 to 250 gigabytes of dedicated high-speed NVMe storage, and a litany of other things there that are really, really nice. And we'd love to continue exploring this. Hardware is kind of new for IOHK, but it's something that we're interested in. We've also had some discussions about putting a satellite transceiver on the device, and what would that look like, and what would spectrum cost for that. If we wanted, for example, run a stake pool out in the middle of Namibia. So that'll come much later, but it is something we're talking about. It's the advantage of having 200 people is that you have some who dream and think about where could we take the future, especially with like that next 5-year roadmap. For example, if ADA is big enough, the market cap's large enough, it would be actually possible for us to build our own satellite network and actually build a massive ATM network and put it all throughout the entire world. It's something the network itself could bear. This is the power of a treasury system. It's the power of cryptocurrencies. It is its own bank, and it is its own venture capital service. So really, we go as far as you guys want to take it, and you do amazing things. And what really amazes me is just the quality of the community. I mean, a letter from Einstein, from one of our community members, just as a gift, and And I said, read the essay. He said, that's the only thing he wanted me to do. Is just make sure you adhere to those principles and you get them done. So if that's where we're at today and the kinds of people we have in our community today, imagine where we're going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, because it's cumulative. You keep building, you keep growing. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for the AMA. It was a lot of fun. You know, I was a little heated in the beginning, and I hope this calms some people down. The key takeaways are Shelley when it's ready, but not too far off. And the roadmap, we're working real hard on it. It's an expectation management exercise now, and we're going to give Tim and the rest of the gang a chance to get it done properly. And a lot of great news. All the videos from the summit will be posted, and the live stream has a lot of great things. And watch the summit. It was a phenomenal success. We had a heck of a lot of fun. It brought our whole community together. It reinvigorated everybody at the company, and it was a great reward. We had tremendous media, 6 million impressions, 15 articles, more on the way. Great podcasts were done. Great interviews were done on CNBC and Africa and other such things. And, you know, the world moves on. So we'll just keep moving towards the next major thing. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.